Creating questions for your dialogue for a particular user experience is always important. A key factor to consider here is how much time and effort you wish to require of the end users who are completing your form. To create a question inside of a dialogue, you open up the dialogue page and you would go to the Questions tab. Over to the right-hand side, you'll click on New Field and it will render a pop-up window. The first area here is asking you for the field name, and this is going to be used internally and shown on reports only. The next area is asking you for the question, and this is actually how the end user will see your question. Using our mini HTML designer, you can change the properties by making it bold, changing the color, changing the font size, and more. If you are familiar with HTML, you may switch to the HTML view and manipulate the properties here directly. Our next option is the field type, and this is telling the system what type of field is this going to be. Is it going to be a drop-down? Is it going to be a checkbox list? Is it going to be an edit text or a password? For clear understanding, let's take a more in-depth look at what each of these fields mean. The checkbox is a single checkbox where the person either checks or unchecks a single box. The return values on this are always true or false. Commonly used for would you like to opt in to our newsletter? Checkbox list is where a person can check multiple values. Date is where the person can choose a date with a little helper of a calendar. In time is where they can choose a time, again with the helper of a calendar. Drop-down list is where they can choose a drop-down. Edit text is a manual entry where they can just manually type any value in here. Email is an edit text as well, but it's also telling the system that it's looking for the email format. Something at something dot something. Multi-line edit is a bigger edit text box which supports up to 500 characters. This is commonly used for comments, additional items, descriptions. Password is an edit text as well, but as the person is typing, you can see that it's making it into bullets. Now, while it's not rendering the actual characters to the end user, on the back end on the report, you actually get to see what they entered. Radio button. Rating is where you can use star systems to say how did we do, tell us how many stars we got, commonly used for surveys. Another great survey tool is the slider. You are able to change the properties that appear up here to anything of your choosing. You have a combo box with checkboxes where you can choose a drop-down and choose multiple values. Combo box with type ahead is where I can type in item and it starts looking for the values I'm typing in. And then we have a list box with checkboxes here. So we have a lot of different options dependent on how you want your form to look. One of the things that we advise is when using an edit text is that you try to limit your options as much as possible. So don't use the edit text too much. If you're asking industry, somebody could put in finance, somebody could put in financial, somebody could put in FIN. So for questions like that, you want to make them a drop-down, a radio button, a checkbox list so that you are making it easier for yourself when you want to create reports or maybe segmentations. You don't have a variety of different options to choose from. It's limiting the criteria. Once you've chosen what type of field you're going to choose, and I'm going to be doing a drop-down, you then go down to the next area, which is map to field, and this is asking the system, where do you want this value to go inside of the CRM? You don't always have to map it back, but if you choose to, then you would find the appropriate area as to where it's going to go. Overwrite value is checked by default, which means that if a value already exists, we will overwrite it. By unchecking this, we will only insert a value if no value currently exists. And then we have a default value which will tell the system to default to a particular value. Up here on display is where you have the options to customize some of the properties of the question. You could add in a CSS styling class. You can change and say, do you want it to be horizontal or vertical if you're using radio buttons or checklist. You can say if it's going to be required and or if you want to have a required flag shown. You can change the width of the column as well as change some of the other options for the helper text in the error CSS class. Lastly, if you're doing a radio button or a checkbox or a drop-down, you will get this additional tab called List. This is where you're going to choose and enter your values. So I'm going to enter a few values in here for my question and then click on Add. When I click on Add, it's going to create the properties and create them in a list style. Once you click on Add, you'll see that it brings up a table showing you the items of how the end user is going to actually see it on the landing page, as well as the return value of what will be coming back to the CRM and be mapping to the field of your choosing. We also have some quick buttons such as Import Pick List, Import States, Import Countries, 1 to 10, and Yes and No. Once you're done with your question, go ahead and click on Save, and you have created your question. You can continue in this manner by clicking on New Field.